We appreciate all of the guests who have appeared on our show and sincerely thank them for providing you, our audience, with useful information. However, the advice our guests provide is theirs, and we encourage you to seek out a professional if you have specific questions about any topic we cover on the Crushing Debt podcast. On this week's episode of the podcast, emotional support versus service animals.
Welcome to the Crushing Debt Podcast with your host, Florida attorney Sean Yesner, where our goal is to help you get rid of the financial bullies in your life.
So welcome back to this week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast. My name is Sean Yesner, owner and founder of Yesner Law, and I'm excited to, again, have a guest on this week's episode. Before I introduce you to my guest, I do want to talk about our sponsor, who you've heard me talk about a lot here in the last few months. So if you need errors and omissions insurance, if you need E&O insurance, as it's called, if you need malpractice insurance, as it's called, if you are an attorney or a title company here in the state of Florida or really anywhere in the country, then you need to be talking to Sam Cohen at Attorneys First Insurance. So you can get a hold of him at sam@attorneysfirst.com, or the website is attorneysfirst.com. And again, Sam can either write insurance anywhere, or if he can't write the insurance, he can either get licensed in that state or he can find you his counterpart in that state to write you the insurance. So if you're an attorney or a title company and you're looking at getting malpractice coverage or E&O coverage or professional liability coverage, give Sam a call or contact him, sam@attorneysfirst.com, and the website is attorneysfirst.com. So I am really excited about this week's guest. I've known her a little over a year, and one of the things that's interesting, we're going to talk today about pet law, and if we get a chance, we'll get to some employment law issues, which are two areas that she covers. Interestingly, in order to get out of law school, I had to write a paper. I think all attorneys have to write a paper, and the paper that I wrote was about the dog bite statute in Florida. So we'll see what I can dust off and remember from that old report and see if I can quiz her and stump her. But my guest is the owner and founder of the Goodwin firm, a law firm in Largo, Florida, with two primary areas of practice. Like I said, employer rights and pet rights. They assist small businesses throughout the state of Florida navigating the complex world of employment law and regulations from the time they hire their first employee all the way through defending them in local, state, and federal agency claims and state and federal lawsuits. The Goodwin firm is also the only firm in Pinellas County with a specific focus on assisting pet owners, pet professionals, and pet businesses with their legal needs. They've represented owners of dogs, cats, birds, and more in disputes involving animal control, condo and homeowner associations, landlords, service animal accommodations, stolen pets, pet custody disputes, and more. They also assist pet professionals such as veterinarians with responding to complaints to the Florida Department of Business Relations, as well as their and other pet-related businesses, needs relating to the special nature of their businesses, and their employer-related legal issues. Their entire staff is filled with animal lovers and pet owners dedicated to the mission of helping pet owners and businesses with all their legal needs. It's been essential to their growth and success that all of their employees get it and are sensitive to the client's unique situations and emotional needs. So with that, I have a little bit more of the bio that I'm going to read, but I want to introduce my guest, April Goodwin. Welcome, April.
Thank you, Sean.
So I do want to talk a little bit about pet law. Before I do that, I want to give out your contact information really quick. So it is April@Goodwin-firm.com, or the website is Goodwin-firm.com. And so if people want to reach out to you, it's April@Goodwin-firm.com, or the website is Goodwin-firm.com. So one of the things here in your bio that I want to read, you've been a superhero nerd throughout your entire life. One of your favorite superheroes is Spider-Man. Like me, Spider-Man is my favorite far and away superhero. His motto, with great power comes great responsibility, although I don't know if that was his motto that he adopted, but that was Uncle Ben's motto.
Uncle Ben, right.
That he adopted. So when you opened your firm, set out to use your superpower of being able to help others navigate the confusing and complex legal system in a way that made them feel and made you feel that you were making their lives better and making the world a better place. And so I think that's really interesting. But I want to jump a little bit into pet law specifically. I think the first issue, the title of the episode, there's emotional support animals and there's service animals. So I know the difference, but someone who has experience with it, what's the difference between an emotional support animal and a service animal?
Right. So an emotional support animal is can be any animal at all. There are two laws that deal with it, mostly the Fair Housing Act, but also there is a statute relating to airlines for emotional support animals. And a few years ago, there was a famous, it wasn't a case, I don't think it made it to court, but an incident where somebody was refused to go onto an airport because of or an airplane, as they're called, because of their emotional support peacock. They wanted to bring their emotional support peacock with them. There are limitations, and we can talk about that, but that just goes to show you any animal can be an emotional support animal. So those are governed by the Fair Housing Act mostly, and then as it relates to airlines, they have their own statute. And then the service animals can only, by and large, be dogs. It used to be they could be dogs and miniature ponies, which was kind of cool. I never had a miniature pony case, but I always wanted one so they could bring it into the office, but it didn't happen. And those are only dogs. They're more specially trained. The rule is that they should be trained to do to your specific disability. But those are governed by the Americans with Disabilities Act. So the Americans with Disabilities Act applies to outside your house, everywhere else, public accommodations, your office, Walmart, hotels, anything like that. Fair Housing Act is what it sounds like. It's just where you live. So if you have something that's just an emotional support animal, let's just, to make it easy, let's say it's an emotional support cat, and your landlord at your office says you can't bring it in, then there's nothing you can do about that. You can't bring it in.
But if it's a seeing eye dog, then that has to be allowed in.
Correct. So seeing eye dog is the best example of a service animal. It's the one everybody thinks about wearing the vest, but they're also, it doesn't have to be that specially trained. They usually are. The common knowledge and what is usually actually true is that so service animals are very well behaved because they have to go out in public, right? So they are very well behaved to do that. They are, you're not carrying them around in your purse or in your arms or in the shopping cart. But that said, that's not really a law. What the law is that it has to assist you. So, for example, I had a woman who had a service animal that was, it was an issue with her landlord, but still it qualified as a service animal. She was deaf, and her son had trained it to let her know when somebody was at the door, when the phone rang. And it wasn't trained by some big wigs, trainer or anything like that. She didn't pay thousands of dollars for this dog. It was a rescue dog. But it still qualified as service because it helped her with her specific disability, as far as, something that it actually did. Emotional support is just what it sounds like, helps you with psychological and mental health issues just by its presence, comforting presence, things of that nature, which is why it's important that you're able to have it at home.
So my first reaction in hearing the story about the peacock is that, so number one, I've had experience with peacocks. I used to live in the Dunedin area here in Tampa Bay, which is filled with them. They used to be wandering around the neighborhoods. They have no fear of cars. They have no fear of people. They tend to be a little aggressive in my experience. And so my first reaction is to say that an emotional support peacock, give me a break. But at the same time, one thing you and I talked about previously, so my mom, who lives up in Tallahassee, has two birds, an African gray parrot and a cockatoo, an umbrella cockatoo parrot. And both of those have been certified as emotional support animals. And so she'll take them to the 911 center to give the 911 operators a little bit of relief from petting the birds, or she'll take them onto campus at FSU. And I know you went to Ohio State undergrad. You got
the
Ohio State University. I went to the Florida State University. Your JD from Ohio Northern University. We can get into all kinds of college back and forth, but it's not so strange to have a bird as an emotional support animal. I think it's a little strange to have a peacock, but I don't think it's strange to have a bird. And she's also got a dog that she uses as well as an emotional support animal. But this comes up a lot in nature of condominium homeowner association issue. And so what's the ability of a condo or a homeowner association to say, no, you can't have that animal? I think if it's a service animal, they would not be able to say that. But then how do they tell that, this is my emotional support peacock if it's never been trained or certified or anything like that? Isn't that the way it comes up with associations?
Right. Yeah. So usually where I see it comes up with associations is a couple of instances. One, when they're going to first apply to a homeowner or potential resident is applying to be a member of the association, to buy, to purchase, to be a member of the community. So they will, they'll say, there's a rule. There are pet rules at these places, and maybe there's no pets allowed. A lot of times what it is there's no pets of a certain breed. There's no pets over, 35 pounds or over 50 pounds. And the breeds, sometimes I think they're probably insurance company dependent. And this applies to insurance companies as well. Homeowner, property owners, insurance companies have to follow these, emotional support animal and service animal laws as well. Because a emotional support animal and a service animal, neither one of them are pet under the law. So even though I do pet law, they're not legally pets under the law. They are, working supposedly. So that is, the idea. And so pet rules don't apply to them. So if you have a pet rule that you don't have Rottweilers, but somebody has an emotional support animal that's a Rottweiler, or a service dog that's a Rottweiler, that in and of itself doesn't apply to them. So when they go to apply, that's when it'll come up. And there's actually no such thing as a certification or a license for emotional support animal to have live with you. What your mom is probably a therapy dog, which we were training my dog to do that too. And that's when they go into hospice and things like that. And that they have certifications for, because unlike emotional support animals, they do have to be at least relatively well behaved, because you're taking them out into public. And obviously the people there want that, them to be well behaved.
Yeah, I think all three are the two birds and the dog all three are therapy certified.
Yeah. So to do that, yes, and that's just you're taking them out into the public, not just for yourself, but out into the public. But anyway, so they are. But emotional support animals, what you would need, there's magic words, as there are with a lot of things in the law, that you need your treating physician. So not somebody you met over the internet, other than obviously now because of COVID. I'm not talking about that, but somebody you just send away to get this letter. There's nothing you buy that says they're ESA certified or registered. Those are not valid. Don't pay for those, and those don't have to be accepted. What it is it's somebody, a professional who's been treating this person as potential resident or resident, and they can say that this animal, first of all, that's under the law, they qualify as, and under the FHA, as the Fair Housing Act, it's handicapped, not disabled, but they qualify as handicapped, and that this helps them, the emotional support animal helps them with whatever symptoms they have. It doesn't have to be the actual diagnosis, although a lot of times with mental health, the diagnosis is the symptoms like depression or anxiety. But, you don't have to say it's like bipolar. You would just say, helps them with, depression, anxiety, with, living alone, or, whatever it may be. And then say that, this animal is needed for that. So there's some magic words there that they need to say, under the law. They say that, and then the association has to let them in, unless, really letting them in is, you're kind of stuck there unless you have some sort of evidence that dog or animal has been a problem or will be a problem to the safety of the other residents. So let's say you have an it's Florida, you have an emotional support tiger, right? That I think I would advise a homeowners association, they could probably safely say no to. Things like that. A peacock, I used to live around peacocks too. Our neighbors had them, and they would come into our yard, and they get kind of loud and can be aggressive. So you may have, depending on the situation and the peacock, I guess anything can be trained. Then you may have some issues there. So things like that. But if it's just because, hey, our insurance won't let us have dogs over 50 pounds or German shepherds, or that's just our rule. We don't want big dogs, or it's not good for the big dog because it's a small condo. They come up with all kinds of reasons, which I'm sure you've seen too. But unless it has something to do with that specific animal not being good for a specific reason for that community, then they have to pretty much keep them in. Now, once they're in, the only time I see a problem is when they have it's usually dogs, there's a fight.
Right.
And there's an incident. And it is, then it's always up for debate who starts it. But some association rules have something about who starts it, some don't. But really, under the law, if they're emotional support, they are allowed to mitigate that. So if the dog owner says, if the emotional support dog says, well, I'm going to training now, so that's not going to happen again. Or I'm going to, walk my dog at night when nobody else is around. Or I've changed my leash because the leash was the problem because I couldn't have control of my dog. Things like that. If they mitigate it, then the association should accept that. Now, if the mitigation factors don't work, that's a whole other issue. But they do need to give them that opportunity to do that. Providing accommodations under the Fair Housing Act or under the ADA, which would apply to employers for anything, emotional support animals, any kind of accommodation, is a two-way street. So the idea is that everybody works together to find a solution so that person can continue to live there and can continue to have their emotional support animal. Sometimes that can't be done. I mean, right. Certainly somebody attacks and seriously hurts a person, that's an issue. It depends on whether or not you can just, get rid of that person. But that is certainly more of a concern than, getting in a fight with, another dog or something like that.
Right. And I think you mentioned it, but one of my questions was, it doesn't seem to, based on what you said, it doesn't seem to be an issue of breed. And so you couldn't limit based on the, quote, aggressive breeds, Doberman Shepherds, Rottweilers, Pit Bulls, Chows, which are fairly aggressive little mean dogs. Chihuahuas, yeah. Sorry to all those dog owners out there. I had Shepherds growing up. I love Shepherds, but they are considered one of the more aggressive breeds. And so you couldn't limit it by that unless, what you said, if I heard you right, that particular dog was being aggressive in other circumstances, then maybe you could limit it.
Right. So let's say it's a situation where they're applying to be part of the community, or if it's a landlord-tenant situation, they're applying to be a renter. If you happen to know or have evidence of that and know by that particular dog, I don't mean like, I had a bad experience with German Shepherds or Chihuahuas or whatever it is. It's, that particular dog is an issue. For example, dangerous dogs have to be registered, and there's certain rules and stuff that, apply to them as to what, where they can be and all of that. That a dangerous dog could not be an emotional support animal under the law, as far as if an association or a landlord wanted to say no, they very well could for a dangerous dog. Usually it comes up after the fact because there's been a fight and there's been something, or a bite or something like that happens. As far as before the fact, yes, you could not just say the breed. Actually, emotional support animal, like barring anything really crazy, like a tiger or something, you couldn't even, the species you couldn't do. So let's say you have a rule that says cats but no dogs. Let's say you have a no fish tank.
Yeah,
a lot of places have that. Can you have an emotional support fish? There's nothing that says you can't.
I guess not.
So that is now again, it's a reasonable accommodation. So if you can come up with, as an association or a landlord, of why it's not reasonable, then you might not be able to do that. But the reasonable solution to that may be they get a first floor unit. Because that's usually the concern is with the aquarium.
Yeah.
So there's all, and my insurance won't accept it. Is your insurance is wrong? They need to accept it if it's emotional support.
Okay. I do want to turn my attention real quick. One of the other things that you do in terms of this area of the law, I know you've dealt with animal control before. I know you've defended dog owners before. I assume that's one of two ways. So you've either defended dog owners against animal control, defended dog owners in terms of custody. Have you defended dog owners in terms of that dog just had a bad day, had a bad reaction, bit somebody, and now they're getting sued?
Yes. Yes, I've done that. Now I don't do the other way around. But as far as the dog, the alleged perpetrator dog owner, yes, I do defend those as well. And that's where you get into personal injuries. It's an interesting area of law, just the pet rights, because I do contracts for breeders. I do, so it's all, there's, family law is the only thing I don't delve into. If you've got, if you're married and you're fighting over your dog, you call Carnes Law. But everybody else, you need to, you can call me. But yeah, so I do defend against that for dog bites. For that, I don't get too much of that because people's insurance usually picks that up. But if you don't have insurance, then that's, I will help you with that.
Well, and I know you also said you deal sometimes with animal control. Is that in terms of trying to get the dog back, once animal control takes it?
Or hopefully preventing that from happening. And that's usually what I like to get involved in those is, right when you first get the call from animal control, because it's easier to, it's traumatic for the dog to be taken. And it's, it's just better if we can work out something with animal control before it gets to that point. But yes, either way, either preventing that or helping you prevent that or getting the dog back once it's been taken.
Okay. And then I know I sent you one. I won't ask you for details. I don't know if you were able to do anything with it, but I ended up getting a call from a lady. Interestingly, after we talked before we recorded this episode, I got a call from a lady who bought a dog from a breeder, and she actually ended up having the dog DNA tested and learned that it wasn't the type of dog that was represented to her when she bought it. And so she was coming to me asking if I could sue the breeder for the for the fraud, for the whatever you want to call it. And we had just talked, and then we had just set up this podcast interview. And so I said, no, but give my friend April a buzz. Without going into the details, any no attorney-client privileged information.
Right.
But that's another situation that you can help with.
Right. Now, the thing there is a pet lemon law in Florida, actually, and you have to have a contract. So, but that is, there is that. And there are certain things breeders can put in there to protect themselves. And most of them know that, or the form that they pass around or whatever has that in there. But certainly, there's these dogs that are, I've talked to people who have dogs that they say like, oh, they said this was AKC registered and I happen to know. I'm like, that's not a thing for this breed. This is a designer breed. They don't have that. So it comes down to false advertising sometimes with things like that too. And if they're doing that, I mean, that could even be, I haven't done this in the pet realm, but it could be a class action if they're advertising that online and they have the general public is susceptible to that false advertising. So there's things like that, that can go on. But yeah, disputes with breeders. The thing with anything relating to like monetary value with pets is that animals are property under Florida law. Livestock has its own special category, which I don't get it. I haven't gotten into too much, just haven't gotten those calls. But for pets, it's pretty much you're boiling down to, for most people, what you paid for the pet and if you have any vet bills. Now that can be a lot for some of these designer breeds and other breeds too. It's crazy to me what people are charging for some of these dogs. But a lot of times it isn't, that much money or relative to how much it would cost to litigate something. But, we can write a letter. We can try to negotiate those things, even if it's not financially feasible to go full on with a lawsuit. But the other, thing with that too is that there's no emotional damages, nothing like that, with anything relating to something happening to your pet, whether it's veterinary malpractice or a breach of contract or something like that with a breeder. Now, if you're talking about being discriminated against because of your disability, like we were talking about earlier, that you can get psychological damage. But that's not really suing over the pet; it's just incidental.
Yeah, although I guess it makes sense. It's related to the fact that if Florida law treats a pet as personal property, then there could be no emotional distress type damages. But then you think about how attached people are to their pets, it sort of doesn't make sense that you wouldn't be allowed those I know I was totally broken up for weeks after I had a dog that got me through college and law school and moved back to Miami with me and moved here with me when I moved to Clearwater. And when he finally died at 14, I was devastated. This dog had been a part of my life for 14 years.
Yeah. I just lost a cat that was 19. Wow. Yeah. It is. It's, and it is absolutely. And there are some there's some movement, not in Florida, we're baby stepping. There's an animal law committee of which I'm a member, but there are some states that are trying to get, I think state of Washington actually did it, but I could be wrong about that, but companion animal statutes.
Okay.
So where you're treating companion animals, so again, differentiating it from livestock, but where you're treating, other working animals, but, you're treating your companion animal with assigning more rights to pet owners for that. So, whether it's more damages, whether it's renters' rights to not, and I know years ago, I don't know if this is still the case, but in Germany, landlords couldn't refuse renters just because they have you can have a no pet rule. Wow. So things like that. And there's, America being so big on, property rights, that's a touchy subject. And, I go back and forth on it myself. But that is certainly something that's being looked at more, is looking at them as companions. And I do think if we could get something like that, it would help with not having as many animals in shelters, because that does happen a lot, as people aren't able to take their animals with them where they live and they end up in a shelter. But that's not the case here in Florida.
So real quick, livestock. When I hear livestock, I assume cows or does it also include like chickens and roosters? And do you know what?
That I don't know. I've had calls. I had 2 calls a few weeks ago, 2 completely different people about emotional support chickens, which was interesting. They ended up not, going another way. But yeah, that is. So they can be a thing. But I'm not sure if like poultry, counts for that. Certainly cattle. Florida is a cattle state. Horses have their whole own law, and actually equine law is a specialty as well, because of racing and thoroughbred, breeding and all of that. And that's a whole separate specialty, equine law is. And there's certain rules about livestock, like if you hit them in the road, who's responsible, and like law school hypo type of stuff.
Okay.
But I don't know if I mentioned goats and things like that are there, but same thing, goats can be pets as well,
Yeah. Okay. Well, let me, one more thing I do want to say is that you also, if I recall correctly, you do represent, and I think I said it in the introduction, you represent veterinarians. So in terms of malpractice, in terms of setting up their practice, how do you work with veterinarians?
Right. So, malpractice would be one. Certainly, a lot of times their malpractice insurance doesn't kick in until after they've received a lawsuit, but they want to have somebody assist them with the defense in front of the veterinary board if they get a DBPR, complaint. So, I've assisted with that, or even just a demand letter or something like that. And then if I start on that and their insurance kicks in at some point, then I can continue representing them if that's what they want. But the other things are their, employment related issues, obviously. And there are certain things, well, not veterinarians, but other pet businesses, in particular boarders and doggy daycares, have certain rules about where they can be and located and all of that. So, kind of assist them and just guiding them on that. I mean, I can't fight that. The law is what it is, and the state is allowed to regulate that. But we can, we can help guide them in those types of things. So same things with the veterinary, getting their business set up. I don't do business law setup, but I work with business law attorneys who can help with the general business stuff. But as far as a specific business of, being a vet, things that are specific to that, I can help them get those things, guide them in getting those things set up.
Okay, good. And I think that's a pretty good transition to the other side of the area of the practice. And maybe I have you on again, we can talk about it a lot more, but I did want to give you an opportunity to touch on the other side of the practice, which is the employment law. And so if I recall correctly, you represent, it could be, veterinarians and groomers and those types, but other different types of non-pet related businesses.
Right, yeah. Any kind of employer is the employment laws are the employment laws, no matter what kind of what type of business you have, for the most part. And workers' comp, there's construction that's a little different, but everybody else, pretty much the same. And it depends on how many employees you have is the differentiating as to which law applies to you. But as far as the kind of business you're doing, whether or not, you're discriminating or being accused of discriminating against somebody for Americans with Disabilities Act or any kind of discrimination or overtime or anything like that.
I was going to say wage and hour.
Matter, yeah.
Yeah, wage and hour complaints, overtime complaints, harassment complaints.
Retaliation, and that's after that. My dream, and unfortunately, I get it. I'm a small business owner too. We all get busy, and a lot of times we don't start hiring people till we're swamped, and we're too swamped to get our procedures in place. So my dream would be to help small business owners understand the importance of doing that at the time or even before they start hiring employees and help them get those procedures in place. So then that way, if and when they do get a complaint, whether it's a complaint to the EEOC or the Department of Labor, or whether it's in court, that they've got a good defense set up because they have their systems all ready to go.
So can you help the employers put like the handbooks together, the hiring and firing?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Contracts, non-disclosures, non-competes, or non-solicitations are really big now. Every state has its own laws. Don't go on the internet and just download something. Or if you do, call me after you get sued for it, and you need help cleaning up. Because they're not all created equal, and you should have one tailored to your business as well. And that's actually part of the test that the courts will look at, is if that non-compete is valid, does it make sense with respect to your business? And you want to make sure you're fully protected. You may leave something out if you just get it over there.
Well, and I want to go into non-competes a little bit deeper, and then we'll probably get to a point of wrapping up. But because I get a lot of times the employee comes to me and says, a lot of times with the bankruptcy practice, my former employer has enforced the non-compete against me, and now I can't work in this industry, and this is the only industry I know, and because I can't work here, I can't make money, and so therefore we're heading down the road of creditors and bankruptcies, and I think you can clarify it, but my understanding is that the non-compete has to be reasonable in time and scope, and so you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, right. So there's in Florida, there's a belief that if you put 2 years in as the length of time, so reasonable in time and scope means it's got to be limited to a certain amount of time and how far. Usually it's distance as scope, but it can be other things as well, as to whether or not it's reasonable to enforce that. The non-competes are generally disfavored in the courts. There's a statute in Florida that says they're okay. Without that statute, the courts may have said, no, you can't do this, because it impedes capitalism, it impedes free trade, and impedes people's ability to work wherever they want to work, and for business to hire whoever they want to hire. So they are disfavored. But 2 years is kind of a presumption, but that presumption can be beat by an employee. They can come and say, look, this is a very, 2 years doesn't make sense, and here's why. And same thing with the distance, 100 miles, doesn't make sense, and here's why. And so, there's things like that. So and clearly if they're being forced into bankruptcy because they can't work, I would say that a court would say that isn't reasonable. Okay.
Although I've got one now that it was enforced. It was enforced at arbitration, and now and
supposed to be enforced might be two different things.
Yeah, and although it's funny because we're in bankruptcy court, and the company that is trying to enforce the non-compete is questioning my client's income, and saying the income should be higher. And I said, well, but you just won on an enforcement of a non-compete, and now you're trying to claim that we're under-reporting his income. What do you think the impact of you winning that case was as to his income? Yeah. You can't beat him and say he can't compete with us and then question why his income went down. His income went down because he can't compete with you.
Yeah. And again, there's you can draft up anything and it can be, enforceable, but, what are you enforcing too if at that point, because you're not going to, clearly they're in against your client because they're seeking a relief to get, paid for a judgment that they're never going to get because he can't work. So there's that too.
Right. I think at this point they're just trying to be mean to him. But regardless, as we get to the end, is there anything that we didn't talk about? Anything you wanted to add?
Well, geez, yeah. Like I said earlier, employment law is vast, and there's whole courses in law school on it. But certainly, no, I think the pet stuff is my passion, and certainly if anything legal related to an animal, and you may not even realize you could hire a lawyer for it. But give us a call and we'll talk to you about it.
Nice. So again, get a hold of April at Goodwin-firm.com, and Goodwin is GOODWIN-firm.com, or you can visit their website, Goodwin-firm.com. I'll also put all those links in the notes so you can access it that way. So I think with that, thank you, April. I appreciate you being a guest on the show.
Thanks, Sean. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I will wrap this up like I do with every week's episode. I hope that at the end of the month you have more money, and not at the end of the money you have more month. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast, and we will talk to you in next week's episode.
If you have questions that you think would make a great topic for a future episode, please email Sean or connect with us on social media. Sean Yesner and Yesner Law, PL, are Florida licensed attorneys. The information contained in this week's episode is not a substitute for legal advice. Your situation may differ, especially if you are located somewhere other than the state of Florida. If you have questions, please contact our office or contact a local attorney. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast.